Foundation videos.
How to write a poem with Special Agent Izzy Siebert.
Hi there, I'm Foundation Special Agent Izzy Siebert, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to write a poem. All you're going to need for this video is a piece of paper and a pencil, or maybe a computer, just somewhere to write, and your brain, and that's it. So first we'll talk a bit about what poetry is. Not everyone agrees on one specific definition of what it is and it isn't. I'm going to talk about a couple different things that I think could be important. One of them is the idea of patterned language. So that's the idea that the words that you use in poetry and the way they flow together is more musical than in other types of writing. So this includes things like rhyming words and the rhythm. The purpose of poetry, I think, is to express feelings and experiences, and the important thing is that you're trying to make the reader feel something when they're reading your poem. So, first, your subject. Your subject is what you're writing about. What is your poem focusing on? Poetry can be about anything. A lot of poems focus on nature, or things that the poet loves, people that they love, or things that they've seen or experienced. Really, you can write a poem about anything. If I'm feeling something strongly, I find poetry is a great way for me to process those thoughts and those feelings, put them on paper, and also create art in the process. So a lot of my subjects are kind of inspired by emotion, which we were talking about earlier. And I think that is important when you're choosing a subject, is finding out how you can connect it to yourself personally. And that's that emotional connection that you want to have in your poetry, which makes it more personal and more powerful. So for me, I'm talking about, today my subject is a bunch of birds that live outside my window, and I'm connecting that personal, emotional connection to the way I'm feeling right now as we live in this pandemic and we're all kind of isolated. So that's my subject today, and I'm gonna read you the poem now, and then we'll kind of talk more in detail about different parts of it and what makes it a poem.
I have birds outside my window, and though they don't have much, in their nests they curl together. They know the wind's light touch. I only catch a shadow wing in the corner of my eye, a splash of ink held dark against an aching wide blue sky. While I am trapped inside my house, each day I'm more estranged. Yet those sweet birds, they still soar. Their world moves on unchanged. Though no song leaves their throats today, I hear chirps and chattering. May sun's warm rays and our friend time teach both of us to sing.
So, let's talk about rhyme. Lots of poetry rhymes, lots of poetry doesn't rhyme. Today I wanted to try and write a poem that has a rhyme scheme. And a rhyme scheme is a pattern of letters that tells you which lines of your poem rhyme with each other. So for my poem, I chose to do an ABCB rhyme scheme. So this means that the second and fourth lines of each stanza, or little paragraph of poetry there, they will rhyme, but the other lines won't. So if we take a look at this first stanza here, the last word of the first line is window, so we'll give it an A. The last word of the second line is much, which doesn't rhyme with window, so we will give it a new letter, and that's B. Then we've got together, which doesn't rhyme with either of these, so another new letter, C. And then we have touch, which rhymes up here with much, so then we'll give it the same letter because the words rhyme. So it'll be a B. So each of the rest of these stanzas follow the same pattern. Alright, now let's talk about rhythm. And rhythm goes back to the idea of patterned language that we were talking about earlier. So your lines of your poem should have a flow that sounds kind of musical to your ear, if you're writing the same kind of poem as I am. And so for today, we're just going to focus on the amount of syllables per line because that's kind of an easy and simple way to develop a rhythm.
I chose an 8-6-8-6 pattern of syllables for each stanza. So the first and third line of each stanza has 8 syllables per line, while second and fourth lines only have 6. So if we take a look at this third stanza, we can see that right here. So we have, while I am trapped inside my house. So that's 8 syllables in that line. Each day I'm more estranged. That's 6 syllables there. However, a couple places in the poem I do actually break the rule. But this is my poem and I make the rules. So I think it still works. So a couple of the lines, when I read them out loud, they sound like they fit well enough, but they don't quite exactly fit into my 8-6-8-6 pattern. So if we take this line, for example, yet those sweet birds, they still soar. We only have 7 syllables there. However, I do think this little comma where you kind of pause for a little breath there, I do think that helps with the flow of the line, so it doesn't sound wrong, even though it doesn't technically fit in the pattern.
So when you're reading your poem out loud, you might even be able to hear the spots that don't quite fit because they don't fit in that pattern that our ear likes to hear. It's really something you do have to learn kind of as you're writing more poetry. So we've talked about the musical devices, rhyme and rhythm, that make poetry sound different to your ear than other writing. Now we're going to talk about what in the words themselves separates them from anything else. So one of the biggest techniques that you can use is called imagery. And imagery is descriptive language, or any words that talk about or describe something that make the reader of your poem able to imagine what you're talking about and bring it to life inside their head. So this is any language that is talking about your 5 senses. In your poem, you want to write about what does your subject look like? What does the air smell like? What are you hearing? All these kind of little details will bring your poem to life.
So throughout my poem, I have a couple of different types of imagery. In the second stanza here, we have visual imagery, so that appeals to the sense of sight. So I'm talking about what the birds look like, how I see their dark wings in the corner of my eye. That's appealing to the sense of sight. Down here, we've got a bit of auditory imagery. So these are the things that we hear. So I talk about the chirps and the chattering. And then finally, we have a couple examples of tactile imagery, which appeals to the sense of touch. So I talk about the wind's light touch or sun's warm rays. So those are things where the reader can imagine the feeling of a breeze or the warmth of the sun, and it just helps bring the poem to life.
Finally, we're going to talk about figurative language, which is kind of a bigger idea or umbrella term that covers a bunch of different things. For figurative language, the meaning of the words is kind of on a level above what the words actually say. So the words mean more than they actually say. I'll kind of break it down and talk about a few of the other things that fall under the idea of figurative language in my own poem to hopefully give you a better idea of what figurative language is and how it can improve your poetry.
For example, I have a metaphor in the second stanza here, and a metaphor is when you compare things without using like or as. So this is figurative language because it means more than the words say. So while literally these words say that I am seeing ink in the sky, what I'm actually seeing is the bird, and I'm comparing it to ink. The meaning here is on a level above what the words seem to say. Then down here, I have some personification, which is when you take something that isn't really a person, like a concept or an idea, and you use words that make it sound like it is a person. So I say, our friend Time. Now, time is a concept, an idea. You can't actually be friends with time because it's not a person. But I personify time as if me and the birds can be friends with it. The words mean more than they say because it kind of describes the relationship between us and time. Like time is something that will help me and the birds.
Last but not least, I have a couple of tips for the writing process itself that I hope will help you. First of all is don't be afraid to take your time. Don't be afraid to write a first draft and then leave it for a few days and then come back to it. Maybe with fresh eyes you'll see something that you want to change that maybe you didn't see before. For me, I probably wrote this poem over the course of a week because I wanted to make sure I really liked it for this video. Reading it aloud is also a good tip because poetry is so musical. It's good to read it aloud just to get the flow and hear how it sounds. Try different lines in different places, even flip the stanzas. Just go crazy. Finally, remember that it doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said earlier, there is no clear rule about what poetry is and what it isn't, so don't worry too much about it. It's a tool for self-expression. You don't even have to show your poems to anyone. I don't usually. You can just write it as a form of creativity, and I think it's a great way to spend your time processing your feelings and just creating something. And now it's your turn to try and write a poem. Remember, you can write about anything. If you need a little more direction, you can try and do what I did and connect an object or something in nature to the way that you're feeling right now. And remember, the 5 things we talked about were your subject, your rhyme scheme, rhythm, imagery, and figurative language. I hope you enjoy writing poetry, and thank you for watching this video. Bye!